Maximize it at the top. Okay. Now let's see if our video is working. Here we are. That's what I'm saying. So you do have to admit them.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone.
Turn our camera.
Good afternoon, everyone. We give everybody about 3 more minutes to get them in, and then we will be starting.
Thank you.
I'll go to view. In the top right corner. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it right now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please just raise your hand. Let me know if you can hear me clearly. Thank you. I want to welcome you all to our first ARPA Orientation tonight. My name is Bertha Johnson. I am one of the city's deputy city managers. Our team here tonight will go through this agenda with you. I have with me in the room today, Simeon White, who's our grants manager. And we have on the Zoom meeting with us, Carlos Hernandez from our city attorney's office, who will also be presenting tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Carlos. I'm sorry, I'm going to turn it over to Simeon first tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us, as Ms. Johnson said. We're going to go over some detailed documents tonight. Pretty much give you an update of what our American Rescue Plan is about. Pretty much just, I'm going to show you a presentation. Some of the information is you have already seen and pretty much gone over, but I just want to kind of reiterate that type of information so that you guys can kind of still be familiar with it. I know it's been over a year since you guys have applied for the application and put it in. Thank you for bearing with us. We wanted to make sure that we had the right stuff in order so that you nor the city would have to pay the federal government back any money. At the end, we'll have a question and comment section. So if you can write down your questions while we're going through these documents. And at the end, we'll go through all the questions and answer and kind of answer all the questions that you guys have. Again, it's the American Rescue Plan. That's where ARP comes from. This was the plan that was signed by the law by President Biden in March 2021. It provides cities and counties with roughly over 130.2 billion. The city of Durham received 50 million as part of this allocation, as well as the county of Durham received 62 million. The final rule was released by the Treasury Department this year. This is why we had to take time to pretty much go over it and make sure our due diligence was correct. This rule provides some change and new flexibility with the money that you guys will receive, but at the same time, you have to be eligible and you have to make sure that your assessments are done correctly. We had an initial timeline for outreach and allocation. The engagement started in April, July of 2021. July.
Simeon,
yes.
Simeon, I'm sorry. Are you sharing any slides by any chance? Because if you are, we're only seeing the agenda at this point.
Okay.
It says it's sharing. Let me stop share and reshare.
Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad you did.
We see the presentation on our screen. Let's stop share and reshare and see if it'll work this time.
Yeah, we see a beautiful agenda on our scene.
Each time you have to do a new share. It's up at the top.
What do you see now?
A timeline. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go back.
I think they heard you.
Okay. As far as the applicant contract, after we get you guys engaged into who's gonna get the actual contracts, we will work with the city attorneys and we have an application contract roadmap that we have to go through. So pretty much you have the supplemental application information and risk assessments, internal drafting of the contract by the budget office and the city manager's office, as well as the attorney's office, administrative evaluation and amendment change, contract signatures for the representative of the organization and the city. The city and council work session would be after that. After the city and council work session, the city council will also have a meeting to pretty much give out the information that we came from the above stuff. And then we will execute the contract. The American Rescue Plan Act also has eligible use of funds. We're not going to be using all of these, but some of these we will be using. And once we be writing the contracts, you will know which funds you are eligible to use. These are the core categories for your grant. Some of you guys are pretty much in the safe and stable housing area, but it's a lot more like community resiliency as well as economic equity and health and wellness. There is a draft scorecard that was pretty much created by the team of city councilmen as well as other stakeholders. With this, we have eligibility, equity impact, strategic goals, community-driven, collaboration, administration, and qualified census tract. This is where we measured your application and kind of scored your application. Some of you guys did very well and some people didn't do very well. But we will be using the higher ones first to try to get them out. And then once we get those qualified ones out with the higher ones, I think the higher ones is the highest score was like 28. And from what we submitted to council was 21 and above. 24 and above. So if you had 24 and above, you'll be a part of the first batch once you pass the next phase of pretty much eligibility. I know some of you guys saw the document online that said funded, but no one's really funded yet. You still have to get to the next process. Really, that should have been said past the first phase. So now you're on to the second phase once you get past that first phase. So these are the scoring criteria that we use, and we pretty much use outside scores as well as internal scores. So it wasn't just city council members or the city employees that actually scored your case. And again, once we create a situation where your guys are part of the contract, we would have to do evaluation and data analysis, which will come down the road as we go throughout the process of doing your grant. And we will track and measure the impact of these investments. These are just the process moving forward: engagement, review it, allocation of the funds, and evaluation of what you have done. Yeah.
So I think we have Carlos on with us, who is going to present some documents to you, which Simeon will be pulling up. And please jot down your questions and be ready for us when we finish this part of the meeting.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time. So I was going to go over a little bit. Simeon talked a lot about how your organizations were scored. And so what I'm going to be going over a little bit more is your projects and who they will be, who's the beneficiaries are, and how that's going to work moving forward. So Simeon's going to pull up a few eligibility tables. One of the things that we got from the overview of the final rule was some safe harbor provisions, we call them in our little industry, but pretty much are little boxes that you need to check off and be able to show that your project qualifies for. So the first is public health, and there's not much there, and it's pretty self-explanatory, and you all will get copies of these tables as well as the risk assessment questionnaire that we're going to go over. But the majority of you are going to be in category 2, which is going to be the negative economic impact. And so the first piece of that analysis to whether or not your project qualifies is going to be looking at one of these 2 columns of the enumerated list that the federal government has already stated. If you can check one of these boxes, and it needs to be only one, your program is affecting the correct beneficiaries that the act was meant to help. So ideally, each one of your projects, you guys are going to know better than we are who is going to benefit from your project. And so long as it's one of these boxes, you're good to go. If it is not one of these boxes, then underneath in section B of 2, you can write out a written justification of why you believe your beneficiaries were negatively impacted by the pandemic and should qualify under ARPA. So first, you do the analysis of your beneficiaries by checking one of these boxes or doing a written justification. And if you think that you're close to one and you're not sure, go ahead and write it out in the justification. We believe that we might be closest to, and then you choose which of the categories, and then go ahead and write it out, your written justification. The second part is going to be individual projects need to fall into one of these categories as well. So just an example, we have food assistance and food banks, childcare and early learning services, home visiting programs. There's financial services for the unbanked and underbanked. It's really important for eligibility that you try to accurately check which of these boxes apply. Now, ideally, you'd only have one, but if your project is so vast that you might have more than one, then just rank them for us. If you believe that you do qualify under multiple, just make sure one being the top and 2 and 3. And the same situation with the beneficiaries. If you don't fall under one of these categories, your individual project, then we have a section for written justification so that you can explain to us and we can explain to the federal government why your project qualifies. So that's the second category. So to review, there's really 2 categories. There's the public health, which is number 1, but that's very small because it's very defined. There's not much there, but you can still do a written justification if you are one under public health. For instance, COVID testing and vaccination, vaccine drives, those would qualify under public health. And so there would be no real worry there. If you wanted to stretch to go somewhere, peripheral to health, but it's not exactly one of those boxes, then it'd be a written justification. And so after you do that, the federal government put stringent guidelines also on the allowable costs for each program. So we would want you to fill out the 3rd of the tables that you'll be receiving, which is the allowable costs. And for a lot of you who have dealt with federal funding before, you're already going to have a finance department who's going to know their way around this. But I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe Simeon mentioned to me that he will be available, and so will another person in his department to one-on-one coach on how to fill this out if there's any issues. So that's the eligibility requirement. One of the reasons why we're going back to eligibility is because the uniform guidelines on ARPA funds is very strict. And so we have to make sure that these funds fall into one of these categories. If not, we're looking at a dollar per dollar refund to the federal government for anything that's misappropriated. So after the eligibility, you're also going to receive a risk assessment questionnaire, which you will fill out. And we're going to pull that up.
Yeah.
But so I'll talk about it. You're going to receive it, so don't worry about having to take notes on it right now. Sydney's going to send this out. What we're looking for with the risk assessment, the federal government requires each pass-through entity, which is the city, make sure that they do a assessment of each organization. Now we're talking about organization again instead of the actual project, to make sure that you have the means to be able to properly spend, record, report, audit, and monitor these funds that are coming in. So what we're looking for, and what the government's looking for usually, is a history of dealing with city, state, or federal funds, grant programs. They're looking for institutional organizations and management, staffing personnel that have had experience with this, even if it wasn't the organization. If you have staff members that have dealt with federal programs, we want to include that in the question. We include that in the questionnaire, and also your experience with audits and if there's been any results from those audits. But it's a pretty straightforward questionnaire. It's not too long, but we try to dive into sort of your organization's capabilities for what is the process of receiving, spending, and monitoring and reporting the funds that we're going to be sending for ARPA. And so once you fill this out, Simeon is going to use this questionnaire and he's going to fill out his own risk assessment based off of your questionnaire and your history. And that, Simeon, I don't know if you want to pull that up as well, the actual risk assessment that you'll be using. We're just going to give you a glance of it. And he'll be grading in terms of low, medium, and high risk. So low risk would be someone who's never had an audit findings, that's had experience with federal rewards, has a seasoned staff and systems in place to be able to monitor and work with the funds, and has also policy within their organization to make sure that all funds are accounted for in every moment. So here we go. So he'll have pretty much the questionnaire. We'll have a question for the internal staff. He'll choose high, medium, low, medium, or high risk. And based off that, he'll do a final analysis at the end, whether or not your organization qualifies under a high risk, a medium risk, or a low risk. So what does that mean for your day-to-day? Would be low risk organizations obviously are going to have less periodic financial and performance reports. The follow-up, we'd be following up and ensure timely action on all identified deficiencies detected with the audits. There'd be periodic reviews that would be done by the department. If you're a medium risk, you're dealing with more detailed financial reports, so you're gonna have to report back to the city. And we're gonna outline all these in the policy for the city, as well as the grant contract that you're gonna sign with the city. It'll go over what your responsibility is gonna be based off of your determined risk assessment. Now, high risk is gonna be one where it's an organization that never had any awards, city, state, or otherwise. They have very minimal staff that have never done anything like this. They've or have done something like this and have had audits come back with different issues come up with audit findings. So it's an evaluation that's required by the statute that we must do in order to make sure we do our due diligence. So once Simeon does that, we are going to be prioritizing those that are clearly within the list of beneficiaries projects that are in the enumerated lists or have a really good written justification, and those with low risk. And then we'll try to knock those out as quickly as possible to get the funds going. And then after that, we'll do a determination of where we go next in terms of priorities. But that's why it's so important to be thorough, but not too thorough, but to be brief but thorough in providing us the information needed to be able to not only do the eligibility requirements, but also the risk assessment. And that's pretty much all I have, but Simeon already went over. Once we have both, they'll be reaching out to each organization that has both qualified under one of the eligibility requirements and has the low risk. And we should be posting the city's policy on ARPA funds, I can say soon, but it'll be before you're contracting. But we are working on finalizing the policy. So it'll be something that your organizations will need to adopt as well so that they can comply with those policies. And that's pretty much all I have in terms of the legal analysis side of it.
Can I ask a question before you run away?
Oh no, I'll be here the whole time. Don't worry.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Is this the right time to ask a question related to what you just presented?
1 second. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna open the floor up, and then you will be the first question that can be asked.
Okay, thank you. And this is for Carlos. So Carlos, thank you for that presentation. So you mentioned that in the risk assessment, there's the section where we select the different areas where we're addressing the needs that align with ARPA. And you said that if we check just one, it's good, but if we check several of them, that you would like a ranking. And so my question is, right now, those are little checkbox things. Do we put the number instead of a checkbox in that ranking?
I would say yes. So just put a number next to it, or something that shows clearly for Simeon, which is your preferred. She's talking about the eligibility. So the risk assessment is the other one, but yeah, the eligibility.
Oh, the eligibility. Thank you for clarifying.
Now, ideally, it would just be one, and it would just be shoehorned in there.
Right.
But if there is more than one because your program is vast, then yes, go ahead and check as many that apply.
And perfect.
And rank them. Yes.
Right. Now, when in the section where you asked us to then submit the budgets, right? Where that portion where the budgets are, you talked about allowable expenses. And I think we all kind of got some documents early on before we created our budgets, right? With what was allowable expenses. So the budget that we're submitting here is the same budget we submitted a year ago with our application, or are revising it at this point?
So, and Bertha might be able to help answer this a little better, but there are going to be some of you that have, your projects have either expired or they've changed a little bit, but so long as your project is the same project that you proposed to the council, which they have approved for advancement to the next step, you're fine. Unfortunately, because this went through council and this is a semi-competitive process, we can't just, it's not your organization that was approved for advancement. It was your project that was approved for advancement. So you must stick with the project that you went with. And if the organization has multiple projects, then they can go with whichever projects were selected for advancement. So I would say going forward, you need to do your cost analysis for now and like in anticipation of this contract that we're going to give you.
Perfect. Now, the amounts that we submitted as part of our budget, we understood our monies could be 1 year, they could be multiple year. So are we going to be doing, here's our 1 year project that must be spent before 2024, or do we submit something that shows here's the breakdown year 1, here's the breakdown year 2, or it doesn't matter?
So from my understanding, City Council chose to go with the 70% funding of the recommended projects that you guys requested. So Simeon, you can better specify that answer. I think some of you have been approved for advancement for a multi-year and some are just 1 year. Correct, Simeon?
I'm not sure.
No, we don't. So let me jump in here. For the purposes, you can go back to that. For the purposes of this document, this is not the contract. This is the information we're collecting to make sure we're in compliance with U.S. Treasury. Once you get to the actual contract negotiation, that's when we'll talk about your deliverables, whether they're in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year.
Gotcha.
All the resources, all the funding has to be spent by 2026. So we will do that as part of the contracting phase.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. And then the other, in the risk assessment, you asked for a copy of the personnel policy. Do we then attach that, since that, could be a larger document than the little box that we have there?
They will be returned in an email, right? What they're returned to, or we're not doing it in submittal, right?
We're not doing this.
Okay, so you would just return that as an attachment back with your other documents.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
But just hold on, because we were working on an application to upload the documents, but we don't know if we're going to be able to do that. So using the same system we use for the proposal development, but you will get the instructions in the email from Simeon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Probably just going to be an email attachment, at least for the first group.
Yeah. I have a question in the chat from Edgar. Do you have any information for applicants who scored over 21 and who were invited to reapply? Yes, I do. I have, if you want your...
Which application you talk?
I can take that if you want, Simeon.
Okay, go ahead. I think sounds
so the city council in their special session for ARPA determined that the applicants who were recommended by staff and the administration to be funded included those that were just city funded, and they are moving forward. The second round, if there is a second round or any money left over or too many people ineligible, would go to the category of those that were recommended for funding that were under the joint city county funding proposals, which were categorized. So right now there is no added language or guidance from council in terms of those who were invited to reapply, just because they made the determination that the first round of funding will be for those that were recommended for funding to be funded, and those as a backup, those who were under the joint city county list who were also recommended for funding.
I have a question, because that's really confusing to me. When I looked at the list because you said earlier it's only for those who scored 24 and above, but looking at the list when they had the A, B, and C choices, there were other organizations in those lists. And so I'm really confused right now.
So yeah, I also had an issue about the language for option C. I don't mean to cut you off. Ms. Johnson isn't, I'm sorry, yes. But I also have very big concerns about the language for option C, because as implied, it suggested to me that since it would be 70%, that it would be those who had already passed that they were going to consider funding, and then those who would also be inclusive would be those listed under reapply. When you look at that option, that language, it is very, it's not clear. It suggests that it's going to be inclusive of those who were in that list to reapply, because we fell between, and as I listened to Councilman Mark Middleton, he talked about, you do know that now that you're lowering, right, the score to be inclusive of, go back and look at the video, 20 and up to that 28. And I think the highest was actually 29. And so I was very concerned about that as well. So if we could get more clarity on that.
That's what I, yes, that's what I was.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's what I was gonna do.
Yes, ma'am.
From the first comment. So there was, first of all, the staff recommendation was to fund those organizations that scored 24 or above at 100%. The city council decided, and Simeon is gonna pull that up, option C, which is to fund all of those that were city only at 70% up to a maximum of 1 million. So when you look at the spreadsheet, there are different columns. So when you see invite to reapply, but it's also in column C, that means staff, that was the first one was staff's recommendation. Fund 24 above, those below, ask them to reapply. That was not what our city council decided to do. They decided option C, which is to fund all of the organizations, except for the one, as Carlos mentioned, that they believe should be joint city county, fund all of those on the spreadsheet, and option C, 70% up to 1 million. So there was a staff recommendation, and then there was a council decision, which was not the staff recommendation, which is what we are going to do.
Okay, so that wasn't the language in that column though. When you look at that column, it says to fund those that were recommended by the council or invited to reapply under that 70% rule. So this is why I'm saying it got confusing for me.
I understand that this is the city council spreadsheet. This is what they came back with. Okay. And so what they're saying is either if they were recommended by staff or they're invited to apply, fund them up to 70%, maximum of 1 million. So what's in column C will be funded. And do you have a spreadsheet? Oh, so we were going to pull that up. It's in Korea.
So based on what was said at the beginning of this conversation, which was that the first batch, the first group of people that will be worked with were those who scored at 24 and above. Is that what I'm understanding? That's what was said.
No, what Carlos said is that we would look at those who have the lowest risk, because those will be the easiest one to create the contracts for. The scoring was just for a way for council to prioritize, because obviously we received over 100 million in requests and we only had the 51 million. So that was a way for them to prioritize. We're beyond that now. Now we're talking about which contracts move forward first.
So everyone in column C will get all of this material, and those then who are the lowest risk will be the ones that will be moved forward first. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Lowest risk, and if that they've responded to the questions, the additional tables where Carlos just explained that we have all of their information, and they've done their risk assessment and they score, they have a low risk assessment. We'll do those first just because they'll be easier to get the contracts through the attorney's office, through city council. Our goal is to work on them simultaneously, but obviously those would probably move faster. You can just take it down.
Understood, thank you.
Because I can't see it. Okay, I'm sorry. Other questions? We also have Claudia Hager on the meeting as well. She is the ARPA person, the general manager at Durham County, and she's their ARPA person who has oversight for the program for Durham County. If you have questions for Durham County, I'll put her on the spot.
I did see one question about updates on the county's funding process. We will, that was in the chat. I think Ms. Kim Shaw. Yes, the county is about to launch its RFP process. Our board adopted categories in which they would fund or seek proposals in. That happened in May, and I don't have those right in front of me, but they align with strategic priorities that the boards had in place, which one could imagine. We do a lot of human services efforts, efforts that are related to education, health, et cetera. And so based on those categories, we will seek proposals in specific areas. So for an example, we may ask for proposals that address maternal health and infant mortality rates. That's health related. There could be categories that are related to secure communities and looking at efforts to do crime intervention efforts, but for targeted populations. So this is a slightly different approach. Communities, that's the great part of ARPA, is that you will see some communities have broad ask, and some may do more targeted and some do a blended approach. We've already launched a major RFP to seek partners to help us with broadband expansion, especially in the northern parts of the community. As you may know, many of our northern community residents have very limited access to broadband, and this is a major initiative. And so we are in that process. That RFP was launched a couple of months ago. We've just extended it because we are waiting for the state to make a funding allocation, and it's a sequencing effort with that. We're trying to leverage as much state federal dollars first. So that gives some updates on a few of them. And again, look for, we're actually updating our board on Monday night. And so please feel free to join in and hear the information there as well.
So you have I'm sorry, Ms. Hager, you do have a website where we can go and get updates? Because I've been looking specifically for Durham County's website as well as the information related to ARPA, and I could not find your information. I can only find the city council or the city. I think you're still on mute.
Okay, sorry. We do have a website. The information that I'm referring to that we're sharing with the board will not be out there until Monday.
Okay, all right. Appreciate
it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Claudia. Greatly appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I just want one question. Is this the place where those who were recommended for city-county joint funding, this would be the time that they would apply? They would just apply to the county?
Well, they would apply to the county based on the categories that we are launching at this particular time. So the council's recommendation was that there were some categories that align more with county type projects and county efforts. The board's decision as to which categories they fund may align with some of the proposals that were submitted. So we will send our list once the RFP is launched to all of the individuals that apply through this process, as well as all of the nonprofits that we have a list of nonprofit entities that typically apply to us when we have our funding cycle for that, as well as do the typical advertisements in the paper, et cetera. But yes, ma'am, this would be the time to apply from that perspective.
Thank you.
I have a question in the chat box from Dan. Rebuilding Together Triangle, our projects were selected to be funded at a lower level that we requested. Is there guidance about how to modify the program to fit the funding that was recommended, or is that to be done at the discretion of the organization?
So one of the questions on the application was if you received, if you did not receive full funding, I forgot how it was worded, then how would you manage? And you can look at one of those. But that was one of the questions. And I happen to know because I was looking at one of the organizations that applied for $1 million and they would only get 70%. And I went back to look at their application and they specifically wrote in there what they would do if they don't get full funding. But to that point, that will all come in contract negotiations. So when you complete these forms and we sit down at contract negotiation and we say, this is the amount you're eligible for, based on, it's not just 70%, you still have to be based, you have to be, your program, your proposal has to be eligible based on the guidelines that Carlos talked about. And so there may be some other fine tuning of your scope and or budgets based on that eligibility criterion. So all of that will come with contract negotiation. That's where we will sit down, meet with you and your organization. We will start at the 70%. We'll look at what you propose. We'll look at the documents, your risk, your eligibility, and then we'll talk about what it is, how we can change the scope to meet the funding that will be made available to you. So that'll be a case-by-case, one-on-one negotiation with our team, the attorney's office, as well as you all.
Did that answer your question, Dan?
And I think he mentioned indirect costs, and I think the risk assessment that Carlos had up, I believe it said, unless you already have a indirect cost amount assigned to you by the federal government, then you assume 10%. Is that what it said? It was at the top, wasn't it? It may have been on the budget part, I'm not sure. But I saw that somewhere on one of the documents. And we'll send you all of these. And so if you have where the budget, they had to keep their budget in. I don't think, is the budget on this sheet?
This is a risk assessment. You said that.
Yes, on the budget sheet. Not this sheet, yeah. So I believe it said assume 10%, but you'll get all of these forms. And again, that will be part of the negotiation as well. It had indirect costs, can't recall which area, but it is on the form.
And we also made reference of the UG provision of every budget item just to help when you're filling out the appropriate costs. So you can look that up as well, because especially with indirect costs, I believe it's depending on your organization and what those costs are, it also affects the calculation.
Yes, it's down here at the bottom, totally. But it's somewhere it gives you a number. But again, that will come with the contract, to Carlos' point, like what actually you're doing and what's the indirect cost for. Any other questions in the chat? Any other questions from anyone?
Hey, Bertha, it's Christina.
Hey, Christina.
Hey, and Simeon, and maybe this is an offline question. We can talk about it. But I was just curious how we're going to handle, I noticed Constance is on a few departments were internal that got awarded some funding. I was just curious if we have some ideas of how we were going to handle those. Are we going to be required to do an MOU or a contract and to be able to keep up with the compliances that I'm hearing here? So I'm just curious, and it could be an offline conversation, but I didn't know if you might give us some thought to that.
Yes, the city manager and I actually talked about that yesterday, but we do have a plan to do that internally with the DCMs versus having Simeon we talked about that. Simeon and our new person who will be coming on, instead of them working with that, we'll work through the DCMs on that.
Great, thank you.
I think you're about to answer her, Ms. Claudia. You're about
to
answer
I am. There was a question from Ms. Hopkins about the risk assessment, and is the process same for the county? It will be very similar. Some of our process will be incorporated in the actual application. And so we will do some of ours through that process. As Mr. Hernandez shared earlier, the rigor that all entities must go through is pretty much the same. And it is the same. How an entity goes through that process may be slightly different. So for us, for an example, for our nonprofits, an entity has to be in place at least 2 years. We have to, have their audited financial statements. And there are some boxes that you check off that on the risk assessment, they sort of align. And so we might not ask the question specifically, but as shared, it's a dollar for dollar payback situation. Any dollar that is not expended properly, and they come through with microscopes, we have to pay it back. And so from that perspective, we want to partner with as many organizations that we can. There's a limit of money, so that's one barrier. But if there are risks, there may be other ways that we still partner. So for an example, the county commissioners allocated dollars for some additional strategies up to, it was about $13 million, because we do recognize that there are areas that some of our partners may not necessarily have the level of the years of experience in a particular area, but we still want to support a particular project. And that would be a separate process. But for this one, because it is so precise in how we have to account for it, the rigor will be the same. But great question.
Thank you again. Are there any more questions? Again, I
have a quick question. I'm sorry, Mr. Simeon. I have a quick question. This is Lenore Smith, and I missed the statement regarding organizations that may have scored above 21 or above, but less than 24, and they were invited to apply to the county process. And I was just asking if you could restate what the process will be for those organizations. Is there the opportunity to get money from this allocation, or do we have to wait until the county allocation?
So go down the show so you can see the boxes at the bottom, yes. So those on the list that say defer for joint city county consideration, those are ones that the council wants us to work with the county. And as Claudia said, if there's alignment, if you apply to the county and there's alignment, there's potential there for us to jointly fund those. And then at the bottom, that bottom list, this is city council spreadsheet, do not fund. These are that we would not consider funding at all, but you could reapply if we had a second round, which we plan to have a second round.
Oh, okay. And when the applications are reviewed, are they reviewed based on the length? I know when we submitted our application, we submitted it for 3 years. Should that be modified, or will we be given the opportunity to reduce it down to 1 year? Or how are you, how will that be assessed during this process?
So again, when we get to contract negotiation, that'll be a negotiation. That would be part of the negotiation. You might say, I submitted it for 3 years, but now a year has passed, and now, you know, we have, you know, reworked our numbers, and it's 1 year, and these are the deliverables. I mean, the council did not stipulate the contract terms. It's the U.S. Treasury guidelines that Carlos talked about. It is the scope that you put on your application, and then the contract negotiation. All of that is based on us sitting down and talking about what it is that we need to have in a contract and how you want to approach your proposal at this time. So that was not part of what council approved, whether it's 2 years or 3 years. They looked at the organization, the scope of the work that we're going to do, and the dollar amount.
Okay, and one last question. Are you providing any technical support or details for the applications? Like if we submitted, we're in the 21 and and we were invited to reapply, are there technical, is there technical assistance that helps us to address or better meet those requirements?
So which organization are you representing?
The Durham Healing Hub.
So the Durham Healing Hub was on the list as, I just want to make sure that I've got the right reference for what you're asking. So the Durham Healing,
we were scored about 21. Collect at the Healing Hub.
Is it Durham Healing Collaborative?
Collaborative, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, so that is one that is deferred for joint city county consideration. So until you need to apply to the county process, until the county process is completed, we will not know what the amount would be or if you would be funded.
Okay, so there's no funding from the city. Our only funding we would potentially receive is after we submit to the county, and if we were identified for funding under that process, then that's the funding that we would receive.
It could be city and county funding. If the city and county both agree that your organization and what you're proposing is something the city and county want to support, then the city could potentially add funding as well. It's just that the city council is not willing to fund your organization without the county support.
Got you. Okay.
Does that make sense? It's like this is something that we're not saying we wouldn't fund. There are some they say we would absolutely not fund. You saw those do not fund. These are like, we think they're worthy, we think we should fund them, but we believe it should be a joint partnership with the county.
Okay, thank you.
I got a couple of hands up and 2 questions in the question box. Let me go to this question first, and then I'll get the hands. Is there a date with which forms you'll be sending and need to be filled out and returned? Right now, we don't have a return date, but I will be getting in touch with everybody with the proper information and make sure that I get the forms to you to fill out, because some of the forms that I'm just gonna have to ask you questions to get the answers to. So I'll be working with my teammate who hasn't came yet, and he will have half and I'll have half, and we'll kind of.
So next few days.
Next few days. So it will be within the next couple of days, if not early next week.
So actually, my question was just really, really quick. It was about the timeline for actually, I guess, having all of the funds allocated. I think it was 2024. Does it mean that we have to have spent that, or you guys have had to have allocated it by that time?
So 2026 is the spending.
Okay, 2026. Thank you. I just wanted clarity on that.
Okay. I see you, Ms. King, but let me go back to the chat box again. What is the earliest anticipated timeline to initiate? I guess we just answer that question. Minute not present work in front of but assuming on contract. Kim, did we answer your question, Kim? Are you okay with that answer?
Actually, it wasn't really what I was asking, but if the whole process goes smoothly, what would be the earliest anticipation that the nonprofits would receive their funding? And that's really from as we're developing our budgets right now, standpoint.
So Simeon had that slide up that showed what has to happen next. So we can't give you a time. It depends on when we get the documents back. We have to negotiate the contract. We spend sometimes weeks on negotiating contracts, and sometimes we spend months on negotiating contracts. It just depends on how quickly we can negotiate the contract. But those organizations that already get big grants, it's going to be real easy for them to, give us information because they know what should be in the contract, right? So those low risk, those organizations who've done this before, it's probably going to be quickly, but it still has to go through our city council cycle because all of these, only one grant in here is within the city manager's authority, which is only $50,000. There's one, I believe there's one in here, or maybe two, because one is at 90 and it'll be 70%. Still, yeah. So all of these will go through the city council cycle. So the sooner you get your information back, we're going to queue them up as fast as they're ready. So we'll get your information back. We'll complete the contract draft. We'll meet with you, discuss the contract, finalize the contract, put it in the city council agenda cycle. And that's the schedule, right? And we can share that schedule with you so you would know what the deadlines are for each cycle. So they're always on, Tuesday nights. So if we miss that cycle, we have to wait till the next cycle. Get it in city council cycle. It goes to city council approves it. Once they approve it, we upload the contract in the system. Whatever we agree to, whether you invoice us or we pay on signature, whatever we decide as part of contract negotiations, then we process the check. What holds up what takes the most time is getting a contract because it also has to be reviewed by the city attorney's office once the contracts are completed. Once they're completed by Simeon and his team. And then sometimes we go back and forth with the attorney's office where they say, this is not clear, we need more information. But we're gonna try to do as quickly as possible because we really want to get some of this money out the door as quickly as possible. So as soon as you get your documents from Simeon, if you could get those completed, make sure they're accurate, get them back to us, and he'll schedule a meeting to sit down and go over with them, and we'll draft a contract and we will move from there. Now the government does move kind of slow, as you all probably know, because you all have probably gotten some money for us. We have a question from.
Let's go, Ms. Ernestine.
Yeah, I had a quick question. I wasn't funded on the city list, but on the second list that you showed, that's a joint city and county, my program was funded, or it said FUND. Is that meaning that I would follow the same procedures, or that we would have to wait?
So if it's under defer for joint city county consideration, we are holding those. They are not funded. There is funding available because we're not spending all of the 51 million. What the council's recommended is only 23 million. So we have money available, but again, the city council is saying we will fund these organizations if the county chooses to partner with us on funding these organizations.
Okay,
So you're on hold for the city until the county process is completed.
I'm on hold for the city to the county, but on that list that you had where it said, I think it's Thrive is what we were calling ourselves, it said fund. So I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly.
That is, as I stated earlier, was the staff recommendation. Column C is what the city council chose to do.
Okay, gotcha.
So you were recommended by the staff because your score was high, but the city council took our recommendation. They sliced it and diced it in a different way. In the spreadsheet that we have on the website and what's here, column C is what the city council funded. As you can see, that's this group. We recommended this entire group.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
It's confusing because they actually used the spreadsheet that we submitted. And again, if it says defer for joint county, it said fund because that was the staff recommendation. But the yellow is what column C is what the council chose, which does not include, as you can see, those there.
Thank you.
You met someone.
Okay, let's go with Ms. Nixon. I'm sorry, Mama Nia Wilson.
Yes, I just have a quick question regarding the financials. I know that the organization that we partnered with submitted I think they already submitted their audited financials. Are you looking for more than that, or will you just be needing that again?
We haven't asked for any financial statements, audited financial statements at this point.
Wasn't there an application, a space where you could upload like your 990s and financials?
You mean as part of the application process?
Yes.
Yes, we haven't looked at those since then, but that would come down when we start looking at how we're going to do the reporting and the evaluation and audit. Yes, but it would probably be outdated for when we get to that point. So we don't need anything else at this point.
Okay, thank you.
We only need the two forms that that Simeon sends back, and it asks you questions about whether you have an audit, but you don't have to, we don't need anything else from you at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Ed Nixon.
Yeah, good afternoon, but good evening. My question is, since it appears we have a great number of non-city agencies participating, has there been any effort on the city side, and I hope this is not inside baseball, but has there been any effort on the city side to expedite the vendor setup process, or is there some other mechanism by which they're going to get paid, once the invoices are submitted? I know typically we have to have a vendor ID and that kind of thing. Has there been any effort to expedite that for the non-city agencies?
Yes, that's part of the checklist that they will do in terms of signing up to be a vendor, which signing up to a city vendor is really fast. They also have to make sure that they're recognized by the state. That is part of the checklist of things that the organizations would need to do. But there's no way to expedite it. Like, we're not going to move, these folks ahead of the line with vendors with finance, but it's pretty fast process for us. We don't control the state process, obviously.
I understand. It's gotten cumbersome sometimes. We try to get people set up, and I just want to make sure that hadn't been looked at, but okay, thank you.
Edgar, you have a questions in the
Yes. Hi. Hello. This is Edgar Vergara. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. Good evening. Thanks so much for all of the hard work throughout this whole process. So I have one request and one question. My request is there any way that the staff can send, or whomever can send, an individual email to each applicant with specific feedback or information and next steps? For example, Durham Healing Collaborative, dear applicant, this is the status of your application. These are your next steps. period. I think that would help with all of the confusion. That's just a request, a humble request. And my question is, if some of us were invited to reapply or to apply to the county process, and it's wonderful news that potentially we could be jointly funded through the city and county. I think that's wonderful news. I'm just wondering when the RFP for the county will be released, if there's already a date, so we can plan accordingly. Thank you.
Ms. Hager, if you want to go ahead and answer.
I'll answer the question for the county release. We plan on releasing that the 1st of July. So as I mentioned, I may have mentioned this earlier, our intent is when the RFP is released, that we get the list of all of the applicants that applied through this process, and they would also get the information. We would also send it to all of the nonprofits that typically are on our listserv to receive funding, as well as do publications, advertisements in all the newspapers and social media, et cetera. We're going to let it, our intent is for it to be for a 45-day process, so folks can have enough time to get their applications together, but also try to move quickly as possible with decision making.
Thank you.
Will those organizations who have been invited to this process through the joint possible process be weighted any differently? Or does that mean that the application that went to the city basically means nothing?
I guess the evaluation process will be the same. I would say that if through that process from the standpoint, we would have to evaluate this as a separate process because it's a whole different cycle. And we would not necessarily weight it higher through that ranking, but as we go through the cycle of looking at, well, how if the proposal elevates to one that could partner with the city, that would help determine what level of funding or what type of commitment the board may decide to do.
Will that be, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but from a ranking perspective, from an equity perspective, we would have to have the process sort of have a reset from that perspective.
A follow-up question about that. Will the markers or manner in which dual funding be determined be part of the application process? Is that going to be clear from the get-go?
No, well, for us, for our process, we're clearly looking at the county dollars. And again, we have targeted areas in which we will do our phases of RFPs. So although the council clarified that they will partner with potentially certain organizations, those conversations may still occur. We just have to follow the RFP process as dictated by the Uniform Grant Guidelines. They have very strict guidelines on how the dollars are disseminated. And so we have to go through that process. And so I know that's not as clear as everyone would like, but just by virtue of the long-standing relationships between the city and the county, we will always sort of vet towards the end or at some point, just sort of what proposals are there. And the elected officials will determine if there are places that they would like to partner. But it will be a situation like all of
the elected officials making the decision. It would be elected officials making the decision on who gets funded from both sources. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would say this, our commissioners would make a decision on what they would fund. And if it's just like the cycle or the process that happened with the council made a decision on what they wanted to fund. From that standpoint, there may be projects that the county commissioners would desire to partner with, and they're based on their strategic plan or other priorities. But for this part of the process, the RFP it will be very similar in that there will be a committee that evaluates it. And just like for the county, our normal RFP process, we take those proposals to the board. And from that perspective, they weigh in on the level of dollars that are recommended. And from there, if there are natural places where there are partnerships that could align, there may be opportunities for additional funds beyond that point. Because again, we will have a similar challenge that we've always had, I'm sure, of having more dollars requested than available funds. I guarantee you that before we even launch the RFP. So I know that there, from a capacity perspective, based on what individuals may ask for, we may or may not be able to honor all. I'm sure there will be more requests than we will be able to fund. Nevertheless, I'm hopeful that the council and commissioners, when it makes sense for them to collaborate, I'm sure they will do that if it aligns with each body's strategy at that particular time.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
Okay, I saw somebody else with a hand up. Ms. Hopkins.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Ms. Hager, I just want to get final clarity about this. So if an organization has been deferred for city and county decision, then those organizations need to submit a proposal to the county's RFP.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
That is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Hager. Digital Durham, if we're working with a fiscal sponsor, do we complete a risk assessment for our organization or the fiscal sponsored organization?
Yeah. So I would say we have Carlos here. We have worked with organizations, and we may need more organizations to have fiscal sponsors depending on their capacity to be their own fiscal sponsor. So we can work with you on that. When Carlos sends you the form, if you would send us your fiscal sponsor information, and we will start from there.
Are there any more questions?
Yes, I had a question in the chat. Let's get Regatta again. I heard that not all of the available funds for this round were allocated. And so my question is if there's going to be a second round of funding, and if so, I'm assuming a new RFP and new application cycle. And if you have a potential estimated date for that. Would it be this year, or would that be for next year? That's my question.
So I think we are proposing the second round to be in the fall. Is that correct, Sumia? Yes. Once we get through trying to get these contracts negotiated, it's the same staff doing this work. And so we plan to have another round. As Claudia Hager has said to you about the county, that could be what would happen in the second round, where this round, RFP process was open to all eligible categories. The council may choose one or more categories to focus on. And the second round, it can be around housing or, one of the other eligibility areas. So we don't know what the focus of the second round is going to be at this point, but there will be a second round because we're only going to use probably less than the 23. That obviously less than a 23 here, because each contract will be negotiated one by one. And the entire proposal scope has to be eligible. So there may be some negotiation where, you know, an organization may not be able to get the full funding, even at 70%, if we can't negotiate the contract in a way that minimizes the city's risk.
Understood. Again, thank you for the hard work. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any more questions? And again, just bear with us. Again, like I said, this is new to us, just like it's new to you guys. We're doing our best to try to get this money out as fast as possible. But again, we don't want to have to repay this money back. As far as the city don't, when I say we, because I'm definitely not paying the money back, but also we don't want you guys to be having to pay the money back. We're beefing up the staff to try to get this going and up and rolling. We're working, doing our due diligence. I'm on weekly meetings, trying to learn more about what's going on. I'm working hand in hand with DCM Johnson, and she has other priorities as well. So right now it's a one-man show, but we're getting there, and we're gonna have you guys the money. We just want you to do what's right for the community with the money, and just make sure that you communicate with us if you have a problem. I'm always trying to update the website as fast as possible, as much as possible. I will be emailing you directly with questions and answers. And like I said, it's going to be a team for both, for our side and your side. We have to work together to get this process out and going. But again, we're going to have another orientation on Friday morning for people who didn't make it to this evening. If you want to rejoin again with some questions that you may have from today, please feel free to. Please feel free to look at the contact list that I put on the webpage, that other people that are doing the same thing as you. If you have questions that I might not can't get your answers, you might have somebody that you know on that contact list that can help you. But again,
yeah, I was just gonna say, I saw Shalisa's, if I pronounced that correctly, comment about regular meetings. You know, we are open to having, you know, regular conversations. The orientation Friday is gonna be a repeat of this, but even when we were doing the proposal process, Leila Pedersen was leading that process. As you all know, when folks ask us to have a Zoom session, because some folks wanted to get together and they had questions, we're open to having sessions like this to continue to talk. And you will get an individual email from Simeon with all of your information. I like Edgar's comment about making sure that those folks, as many of you have asked about, the deferred for county, for joint with the county, you know, making sure we send everyone a notification about that and explain that so that folks are clear about they have not been denied, but it is on hold. And we will, as Claudia said, you know, we'll have discussions when the county's process is over, but we'll make sure we communicate to those folks as well, because they may not, you know, be on this call, but you will get your email confirming that you've been approved with the documents. No amount is absolute at this point. It's up to 70% of what you asked for, because we would have to negotiate the contracts. So I just thank you all for coming as well. I want to thank Simeon. Leila left us in April, and she had been leading the process since last year. And he has stepped in and you know, started working with you all, managing the website, managing all the emails, you know, working with our attorney's office, trying to get all of these materials ready, going to the webinars at School of Government, as well as U.S. Treasury, to the North Carolina League of Municipalities. So he's been doing all of this, trying to get up to speed on this, because Leila left and he had to take over this entire program in a short period of time. So, and thanks to Carlos, who has, in the attorney's office, I've never spent so much time with the city attorney's office ever in my 16 years with the city. Carlos is with us all the time, working alongside with us. And we would probably be faster without Carlos, but we might not be correct, because, you know, we want to just get the money out of the door. But he slows us down and makes sure that we're, you know, we're doing it right, and that we don't have to keep coming back to you all. So thanks to Carlos for slowing us down but getting it right. So I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Yeah. Thanks to Claudia for joining us. We just asked her at the last minute this afternoon. So we knew that there were going to be questions about the county process. And so she was able, I wasn't sure she was going to be able to make it today because we asked her at the last minute, but thanks to Claudia. She's always willing to jump in, and she's been involved in our process since the very beginning.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, let other folks know in your organization or other organizations that they're welcome to join us on Friday. If you want a second ear to hear it, send someone else on Friday. You know, you're welcome to join us. And I think that's it for tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe. God
Thank
bless.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.